It's time now to disrupt some of that more incessant right-wing spin with a little something we like to call the facts. Earlier this week, Senator Ted Cruz repeated the debunked conservative talking point that stand your ground laws actually benefit African Americans. Tell that to Trayvon Martin's mom. Oh, wait, he actually did.
In Florida, the data show that African American defendants have availed themselves of the stand your ground defense more frequently than have Anglo defendants.
That was a congressional hearing on Tuesday to examine stand your ground laws. The same hearing where Trayvon's mother, Sabrina, testified alongside another grieving Florida mom, Lucia McBath, both women recalling the memory of their slain sons who were brutally gunned down in two separate but equally senseless acts of violence. Cruz was alluding to a long-ago debunked story from the conservative website, The Daily Caller, that was later repeated and again rebuked on Fox News. The article, entitled "Blacks Benefit from Florida Stand Your Ground Law at Disproportionate Rate," argued that African Americans benefited at a rate higher than their proportion of the state's population, saying that because 1/3 of stand your ground claims were made by black defendants and those who used the defense were successful 55% of the time, while white individuals were only successful in 53% of the cases, including pending cases. But the fact is, such a claim is grossly misleading and, in fact, not correct. First, in its analysis, it neglects the fact that killings by black perpetrators are more likely to be determined as justified under the law, in part because their victims are black. And as the Atlantic Wire pointed out, the stand your ground defense was successful in 1/3, or 31% of cases where the killer is black, and that a greater number of cases involving black killers are found justified than whites. But, and this is very important, as a report by the Tampa Bay Times found, defendants claiming stand your ground are more likely to prevail if the victim is black. 73% of those who killed a black person faced no penalty, compared to 56% of those who killed a white. Now, that number increases to 78% when you include Latinos. Bottom line, it is a fact that about 4 in 5 killings of black people, which relied on a stand your ground defense, resulted in the killer going free. And I would hardly call that a benefit for Florida's black community. Would you? Joining me now, Editor-in-Chief at ThinkProgress, Judd Legum, and from the Advancement Project, Judith, Browne, Dianis. Welcome to you both.
Hi.
So, Judd, I want to start with you because I know at ThinkProgress you guys have been tracking and trying to sort of break down, stand your ground from the Castle Doctrine. So kind of talk to us about the breakdown that you guys were doing this week and trying to keep this straight.
Well, I think it's important to remember where this came from, because for hundreds of years you've had protections that allowed people to defend themselves. You can always defend yourself if someone's threatening you. And in your home, you can stand your ground. If someone breaks into your house and starts threatening you, you don't have to leave your home. But what Stand Your Ground did is it disrupted that set of legal guidelines and said, we're going to give people an additional right. And that says that even if you have the ability to retreat, and even if you could de-escalate the situation, we're going to let you, wherever you are, stand your ground. And even if you escalate the situation and ultimately kill the other person, that's okay. So it's really giving people the right not to retreat. And there's been deadly consequences for that. And as you illustrated in your intro, when the victim of these stand your ground attacks are African American, they tend to be more successful.
And Judith, to that point, I mean, one of the things, there were comments made by John Lott, who was one of the witnesses, and Lindsey Graham, I'm not going to play them, but essentially saying they didn't see any kind of, the perception being they didn't see any racial bias. But part of what that completely misses, and what Ted Cruz completely doesn't understand, which has never stopped him from talking before, is that a big piece of this is based on the perception of who is a threat, right?
That's right. I mean, these laws are all based on perceptions and what is reasonable and what is a reasonable threat. And that's really in the mind of the person who becomes the killer. And so if you take the case of Jordan Davis, which people really need to follow this case, which will go to trial next year. Jordan Davis is the young man in Florida who who was gunned down by Michael Dunn. Michael Dunn was in a gas station. They got into an argument about music coming from the car that Jordan was in, and Michael Dunn said it was too loud. He argued with these young men, and then he pulled out a gun and shot several times into the car, killing Jordan, and then drove off, okay?
Right.
Said he didn't know that he was dead. But the point is that he says he was standing his ground because he feared for his life. These young men had no gun.
Right.
There was no weapon. And so this is all based upon his own bias. It's the George Zimmerman, we're suspicious of young black men, and that's how people get a justification for killing people.
And you know, the Urban Institute actually showed that in stand your ground states, white on black homicide is 354% more likely to be justified than white on white homicide. So to your point, you know, Judd, the other piece of this is, and Judith, I want you to weigh in on this as well, stand your ground laws are bad for everyone. I mean, it's not like, you know, when we talk about just the idea that it benefits someone is ridiculous, but it's bad for everyone. Texas A&M did a study, and they found that murder and manslaughter increases by 9% in stand your ground states. So defending these laws and not recognizing the danger that they create in society, I think is completely foolish.
Well, we really didn't even have stand your ground at all a few years ago. This is a very recent law, and it's starting to pop up not out of accident, but because an organization named ALEC, and really the NRA as well, working with them, has systematically pushed stand your ground laws. I think Florida was the first state, and then they've gone around the country and tried to get them in almost every state. So this isn't something that's enshrined in the Constitution. There's no right to stand your ground. This is a brand new invented thing that we just came up with a few years ago, and now we're starting to see the consequences of it.
Judith, you get the last word on this.
Yeah, I mean, these are shoot first laws, right? Shoot first, ask questions after. And you should know also that I found out that actually Rainbow Push Coalition, Reverend Jackson actually filed a case against Georgia's stand your ground law just this Friday, yesterday. So we'll see where that takes it. And it is about how this is unequal justice.
Right. Unequal justice, unequally applied. Thank you, Judd Legum and Judith Browne Dianis.
Thank you.
When we come back, a recall election over kids in school 5 days a week. It's FYI, some of the stories you may have missed this week.
Is that your car?
Maybe.
Kent, I'm going to tell you the most important mistake you ever made after this break. So, Kent, that mistake you made, that fundamental, life-changing error, that cosmic fail, that...
Just tell me already.
After this break.